Hi, I'm Paul Macey. I'll be giving a session on teaching with technology. Now, this session is focused on what you can do with technology. We'll be running through several different examples, so it's really more of a hands-on session, and you should be able to come out of this with specific ideas you can use from just trying one or two new things in a class, in a lecture you're already giving, through to getting a sense how you would flip your whole classroom and have a whole set of activities using technology. And a key point here is that technology by itself is not a wonderful thing. It's simply that it lets us teach in new ways with new methods. In this session, we're going to be talking about technology, but also want to think about teaching and learning, not just technology by itself. And really the take-home message is technology lets us use different teaching methods, and we can really start thinking about how do students learn. When we think about technology, the first one that's most topical is what we now call the flipped classroom, which involves pre-recording and podcasting lectures, so students are exposed to the lecture content prior to class, and class times available for activities other than lecturing. Thinking about other technology, wireless internet gives us access to the web in class. People now have multiple devices, smartphones, iPod touches, tablets, cameras, that they can use to create content in class, and more recently students can easily take over presentation of the class with their particular device. We have YouTube, we have Moodle. Talking about Moodle, there are many tools in here, and I'll be covering a few of these and showing how they're used or how they could be used in class. I've listed some here: quiz discussions, questionnaires, activities, also synchronization with my UCLA gradebook, to name a few of those listed here. So once the lecture is recorded, the question is, what next? And at first this can seem quite daunting. You've got 1, 2, 3, 4 hours of lecture time and no lectures, which brings up the question, well, what do I do now, and how do I teach in this format? Which for me brought me to the question, well, how do people learn? How do people learn, and how can I as an instructor facilitate that learning? So again, the traditional model, like many of us, here we were in front of the class with everybody sitting in class, and they would look at the PowerPoints and listen to us talking, and there'd be the odd question, but that would take up the lecture time. So what happens when that's not the case? Well, just to digress from the technology for a moment and think about thinking, if we look at Bloom's taxonomy, this hierarchy of knowledge, we've got a couple of versions of it. What I would assert is that this gives us a way of thinking about knowledge, but that's different to learning. For example, we don't necessarily learn well by going and looking at remembering every single possible thing at the bottom of the pyramid, and then understanding some of that, then applying some of that, then analysing it. We tend to learn by example and generalise from that. Which brings us back to the classroom. What do we do now? And there I am as an instructor, and I have my students, and there's time for them to ask questions, them to work together. I can still deliver some material, and there's time for activities and interaction. So let's look at some specific examples. Polls. in the middle of class. This is like with the eye clicker. It just engages the students, and it can also be used to gauge their actual understanding. In-class tests, if we have them at the beginning of the class, they can be a way of checking that the students come to class already exposed to the material. And if we have a short test at the end of class, we can help encourage the students to remain attentive during the class. Now, a very powerful tool is to ask questions in class online and have the entire class give an answer. So we know that normally there'll be one or two students who grudgingly answer a question when we ask to a lecture hall. However, it's very different if we give an activity, give students 5 minutes to answer an online question. What we find is every student gets involved, and then in real time in class, I as the instructor can look at those answers and see whether the students have understood what I'm trying to get across within 10 minutes of asking that question. So to get started, there are 2 steps. The first one is the podcast and the actual recording technology. We can help you with that. The second part is you'll find you need to redesign your lecture slides and typically make them shorter than what you would deliver in class. And it also makes a lot of sense to design short tests while you're creating your podcasts. Some final points. Using technology is different from being a good teacher and having students learn. It's simply a tool that gives you access to new methods. And it does take some effort to get set up, and it also takes some rethinkings, and that takes some mental effort and time to decide how you're going to teach your class in this new way. That concludes this introduction to the Introduction to Teaching with Technology session. So, we'll see you in the session. Bring your laptops. The idea is you'll be able to get started with some of these right away and really get your hands stuck into this technology after this session.